Hi, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. If you haven't already done so, please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. And as many of you know, I am the author of the book, The Only Witness. It's a historical fiction on the burial shroud of Jesus Christ, and it traces a possible history of the Shroud of Turin over the last 2 millennia. Today, we're talking to Nora Creech, and she's a longtime friend, but also definitely a longtime Shroud researcher and speaker on the Shroud and its history. And she has and is a big part of a number of different initiatives related to the Shroud, and we're going to be talking about a couple of those. So let me just tell you a little bit about Nora first. She has really been interested in the Shroud, I guess, since the 70s. So, and has really, when you talk to her and hear her speak, you can tell that she really is one of the most knowledgeable folks on the Shroud. But today, I wanted to just point out one specific thing, and that was that she attended a year-long course and was a part of a year-long course called Shroud Studies, and it was offered by the Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum in Rome, Italy. And so, Nora, say hello, and then we'd love to hear a little bit more about that. I'm sure it was a great program.
Thank you, Guy. It's great to be with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my favorite topic, the Shroud of Turin. And as you said, I was very blessed to be a part of the very first course in English that was offered by the Regina Apostolorum, which means Queen of the Angels. So they offered a post-baccalaureate or postgraduate certificate in Shroud Studies, and it was offered for the first time in English in 2018. And so it's a full year course, but it's 6 semester-long classes, so 3 in the fall semester and 3 in the spring semester. And it's really a deep dive into understanding the Shroud. So from a historical standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, and then also the relationship of the Shroud to the Gospels. And so that course is offered, as I said, through the Regina Apostolorum, which is a pontifical university located in Rome. And under the umbrella of the university is the Science and Faith Institute. And under that umbrella is the organization Athonia. And so Athonia is the word in John's gospel, the Greek word that means burial cloth. And so when Peter and John run to the tomb on Easter morning, what they see lying in the tomb is Athonia. And so that's where the name of the organization comes from.
Yeah, that's and that right there is for the Shroud, and certainly the Shroud as it's kind of represented in the Gospels. That one word is so critical to the whole study of the Shroud and the history of the Shroud, and then certainly its connection to, like you said, between the the spirituality side of the Shroud and then the Gospels and everything. So that's fantastic. So now you were recently with the Athonia up at the National Eucharistic Congress. Tell us about that. I heard it was almost overwhelmed with people and interest and things like that.
It really was an amazing experience. So the National Eucharistic Congress was held in July in Indianapolis, and it brought together Catholics from all over the United States. And it was an initiative of the United States Congress of Catholic Bishops. And it was an effort of renewal for the church, especially renewing the Eucharistic focus for the celebration of the Mass. And so when I heard about this event taking place, I saw the connection immediately to the Shroud, because in the Catholic sacrament, we believe that the true presence of Christ is fully present in the Eucharist at the Mass. And on the Shroud, we can see Jesus' blood poured out for us, literally poured out for us for our salvation. So in my mind, there was an immediate connection between the Shroud and the Eucharistic revival. And it seemed like the absolutely perfect place to have an exhibit so that people could really understand what the Shroud is and how it helps us to really deepen our faith. So that was a little bit of the background. And at that point in time, so that was probably in early 2022, maybe, or 2023. And I was starting to work with Athonia to help them develop their exhibits. And I came on board to really help Athonia in North America. And as you know, at the time I was working on an exhibit at the National Museum of Funeral History in Houston. And so we wanted to have the Athonia items as the basis of our exhibit. And as we were looking forward to the National Eucharistic Congress, we realized that it was a good opportunity to update the exhibit and to present it in kind of a new and fresh way that would be very engaging for people.
Yeah, and that's actually at the National Museum of Funeral History. That's where we met for the first time,
Yes, yeah.
and Barry Schwartz was there, and obviously we're so sorry that he passed this last June, and but there were so many Shroud enthusiasts there, and what a great opportunity to see firsthand, some of the kind of the artifacts and or replicas of the artifacts, and then to really have a wonderful experience. And that was such a great thing that you and the National Museum of Funeral History put on.
Well, thank you. That was actually Barry's last public appearance. And
Mm.
of course, we didn't know it at the time, but he told me when he got home from that he wasn't traveling anymore, that he was tired and he wanted to stay home and he loves Zoom. So we were very, very blessed to have him and also Dr. Ken Stevenson and Professor Rudy Dichtel together and talking about their experiences being a part of the Shroud of Turin research project team. So I'm glad you were
Yeah.
a part of it too.
Yeah, I was debating as to whether to go, and then I said, "Oh, I need to go. I need to go meet some more of the folks face to face." And because I had interviewed, a lot of folks, here just like we're doing now, but it's, not only is it great to see people and face to face, but also then to experience, what they've kind of experienced as well in a very close one-on-one way. So. Wonderful, and thank you for putting that on. So now, the Athonia, you talked about what that is. Now, you are putting together or have put together an experience, a series of elements that you're going to be part of this exhibit. So tell us a little bit about that.
So Athonia has a long history of exhibits. In fact, a lot of people have probably seen our flagship exhibit, which is at the Notre Dame Hotel in Jerusalem. And a lot of people tell me that they've seen that exhibit and it was life-changing for them. The centerpiece of that exhibit, of course, is a beautiful replica of the shroud, and then a life-size sculpture by the Italian sculptor Luigi Enzo Mattei. And people are so moved by that experience of seeing the replica and the sculpture. And then there's also 24 explanatory panels that go through the history and science related to the shroud. And there, in the original version, there were some connections to the scriptures, but not a deep dive into how the shroud is a mirror of the Gospels. And so we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of that initial exhibit being installed in Jerusalem. It was installed in 2006, I believe. And so we felt like for the National Eucharistic Congress, we'd like to re-envision the explanatory panels and have them go a little bit more sequentially through the history and science, and then really focus on the connections to the Gospels and also some of the Old Testament prophecies and the Psalms to show how the shroud is truly a reflection of Jesus' passion, his death, his burial, and then ultimately his resurrection.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the reflection of the Gospels, because when I present on the shroud, I usually that's really what my presentation is on, and it truly is a reflection of the Gospels, and not only the New Testament, but there are so many references in the Old Testament to the New Testament, and the all four Gospels, and then to actually see those in the cloth and in that image and in the science underlying the cloth with the blood and then the dust and everything else, and it's really fascinating. So Now, you said that the first exhibit, this was 20 years ago, is in the uh, Notre Dame Hotel in Jerusalem.
Yes, and I actually haven't seen it myself. It's on my bucket list to go and see the exhibit there, but I've seen a lot of photos of it and it's breathtakingly beautiful. And it's quite close to the Temple Mount. So I
Hmm.
think people can have that experience of going on the Temple Mount and then coming and seeing the exhibit and really getting a sense of what Jesus suffered for us.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, and he certainly did, and that what I would like to do, and now that you're talking about it, is to actually go see it, and then actually walk the ascent to Calvary, and and understand what he did suffer and what those last minutes and hours were like. It's very moving. And when I was out at the National Museum of Funeral History with you and Barry and Ken and everybody, you really get that feel when you look at that image of Christ and the wounds and everything that he suffered. You can really see how much what he did to take on our sins. That's for sure.
And I think people are often surprised how much information is contained in the shroud. And a lot of times people think that it's just an image of the face, and they think the photographic negative is actually what you see when you look at the shroud and not really the kind of indistinct image that is the true image on the shroud. And when people start learning about the shroud, they're just kind of blown away by it. I had one experience at the National Eucharistic Congress that I'd really like to share
Yeah,
because we, as you said, there were so many people lined up. We tried to keep the line moving, but we were very constrained by how many people we could have in the exhibit at one time because of fire code. And so we tried to keep things moving, and we had a group of young volunteers that were managing the line for us. And these were college age students, and they worked so hard all day long, keeping people in line, keeping them happy, and keeping everything moving. And so I went out and I said to one of these young men who was leading this group of volunteers, I said, I want to bring you in and I want to take you through the exhibit myself so that you can see why all these people are lining up and what they're here for. And he said, it's okay, I'm good. And I said, well, what do you know about the shroud? And he's like, it's okay, I'm good. And I said, I really want you to come in. So I brought him in and a couple of the other young volunteers, and I started taking them around. And he went like this. And he said, I can't believe this. He said, I've been a Catholic, I've been a Christian my whole life, and nobody has ever told me this before. He said, how can I not know this? And that is exactly the point of why we're doing this, because people need to know this. And when they see it, when they hear it, when they experience it, it changes their lives. It's not just something that they're told, it's something that they can see and understand for themselves. And it's real, it's tangible. And so having the exhibit, having the beautiful replicas, it really touches people and it deepens their relationship with Jesus.
yeah, no, I agree with that, and that is such a wonderful story, and how touching to finally, to have somebody that knows Jesus but doesn't know him at kind of the next level, and what a stories. So now you have put together I guess it's a brochure of some kind, but it also has a lot of information on it. Did you want to share that with us?
Yes, I'd love to. So this is a booklet, and I'll share my screen in a second. But what we did, the new panels that we envisioned for the exhibit, they're large. They're 4 feet wide and 8 feet tall. And so when people come into the exhibit, they're surrounded by these beautiful panels. And you can see sort of the color scheme from the cover of the booklet. We went from this kind of dark, what we call Athonia red, over here to this gold. And we really wanted it to be a progression because we wanted to make sure that people, when they're coming through the exhibit, they go into the agony, they go into the passion, they go into the suffering, but then they come out and they ascend up with Jesus through the resurrection and the ascension. And so we wanted there to be kind of this progression from darkness into light, into this kind of beautiful journey where the focus is really hope and resurrection, because we felt like in the past there, when you look at the shroud, it's so impactful and it can be so emotional that you can get stuck in the suffering. And we wanted to lead people through the suffering to why Jesus suffered this. And it was for our salvation. Jesus said he was the first fruits and that we would be the fulfillment of that. And so it's a promise to all of us that we will be resurrected with Jesus in glory too. So we had that progression in mind as we developed the exhibit panels. So I can share my screen and show you, let's see.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. That's I like that story of the progression of hope, because it is, when you see the shroud, you're so right about it. Seeing the wounds and the scourge marks and the holes and the blood marks on the hands and wrists, and then on the feet, and the bruises on the face, and realizing that he took on that suffering for us, and which means that there's hope, which means that the resurrection is really the hope. So I really like that message that you have there.
Well, I'm glad you got it. I'm having trouble here sharing my screen now, even though we did practice this ahead of time.
All right,
Okay,
very good.
all right. Okay, thank you for your patience with me. So this is the cover of the booklet, and it's also the first page of the it's the first banner that people see. And the theme of the exhibit is, who is the man of the shroud? And a lot of people ask me, why did we name it that? Why didn't we just say, here's Jesus reflected in the shroud? And the reason why is because of that progression that we were talking about. We want to invite people in and invite them to ask these questions for themselves. We don't want to provide all the answers, so that people can go through and question for themselves, who is this man? And if he's Jesus, then who is he to me? And we actually end the very last panel, we end with the question that Jesus asked his followers, who do you say that I am? Because that is the main question that we all have to answer as followers of Jesus. So just a little bit about the exhibit. We developed it with this kind of a legend. So you can see we have this thread that goes, it runs through all the panels. So it's the idea is everything's woven together through this thread. And so we have history threads, science threads, scripture threads, and then of course everything leads to hope, our hope in the resurrection. And so there's 24 panels, and the panels are, sometimes they're all one topic. This one, for example, it combines history and scripture. So we have a blue section and the Athonia red section, where we bring in some of the scripture verses and we explain how the shroud, what the shroud is, some of the background, and what is linen, some of the markings on the shroud, and what did the man of the shroud look like. So we guide people through this journey from the history through the science. We spend quite a bit of time looking at where the shroud could potentially have been during its early days, then the actual first photograph in 1898, and all the scientific studies that have been done on the shroud. And we really highlighted STIRP because STIRP is still the only multidisciplinary study that has ever been conducted on the shroud. It's still extremely important to us as in terms of our knowledge of the shroud. We looked at the image, the blood, dating, and I'm going through quickly because I wanted to get here to this section where we focus solely on the scriptures. So we slowly go through the passion of Jesus, and we talk about the scourging and how you can see the scourge marks. We talk about the crowning of thorns and look at the scriptures about that. We look at the way of the cross and how Jesus carried the patibulum, how he fell, and his knees show that he fell on the way to Calvary. We look at the different positions on the cross for the breathing and the exhalation. that one endures as they're being crucified, and then, of course, the pierced side. So we really have a lot of information in each of these panels. And the other thing I want to point out is there's 24 of them, and we designed it so if somebody only has 30 minutes, they could come through and they could read a headline. And so they would know what this panel is about. And then if they wanted to go deeper, they could read the headline and then they could find out more information, and then they can see how that headline connects to the shroud. So if somebody really only has 30 minutes, they could go through and spend 1 minute per panel, look at the replica, look at the life-size sculpture, and they would learn a lot just in that short amount of time.
Mm. And those panels are very informative. I really like the way that you have them organized, and I do like also the thread, going through each of the panels. As a side note, when after Barry passed away, we went out to I don't know, recover and transport and then and save a lot of the materials that he had, books and papers from Stirp, which was 1978. And he also had in little glass vials, he had a thread from the shroud from 1978 that he's had. And it was an absolute honor. I had the vial in my hand. I didn't have the thread, of course, but I had the vial in my hand, and it's so amazing to think that first of all that's 2,000 years old, and then what that means, and then now that you've incorporated the thread all the way throughout the whole exhibit and the whole that whole piece that you have there, that's really wonderful.
Well, thank you. I think when people start to realize that all of this information is on an organic piece of fabric that's woven from these little tiny threads that are less than the thickness of a human hair, that are all twined together, woven together to make this absolutely beautiful piece of cloth. And then we have on top of that cloth this image that has all of these characteristics. When you start multiplying all of these facts together, it literally blows people's minds. Hence that young man holding his head together, because he really could not comprehend that what I was telling him was something 2,000 years old on a piece of woven flax. It really truly is remarkable. And with the exhibit, we have the time and the opportunity to go through and talk about what is linen. In our day and time, we're not close to things like that. We don't realize that having a piece of linen fabric was so priceless in the first century, and it would take a rich man like Joseph of Arimathea to provide something like that. And just the rarity of the weave and the linen fabric, just that alone is an amazing fact. And you just keep building and building on that until you get to the place where your mind truly is blown, that we have this beautiful artifact that documents it and mirrors exactly what the gospel message tells us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that is so critical. Now, you also, as I understand it, you've only stuck with the facts, so to speak. And now, unfortunately, in all of these things, and especially the shroud, there's a lot of controversy, but there are some facts that I think everybody can agree with. Tell us about that and why you did that, and tell us a little more about that.
So Athonia has what we call a scientific committee, and these are shroud experts all over the world, and they are also the instructors in the postgraduate certificate program. So we have access to these people who are the actual researchers who have done the studies on the shroud. And so every single sentence that every sentence that's on the panels has been vetted by that group of scientists. And so we wanted to make sure that what we presented was absolutely authoritative. And if it was at all questionable, we made sure it was either noted that there are differences of opinion on this, or we took it out. Because there are so many things, like you said, that are completely 100% agreed upon, that we can talk all day just about those things. We don't have to go into the things that are disputed or people have different opinions about. And so that was the position that we took. We wanted to have an authoritative exhibit and everything that is widely agreed upon by the scientific community. We didn't want to have any chinks in the armor, so that if we presented something that was dubious or questionable, or somebody else had a different opinion, we didn't want it to reflect poorly on the other items in the exhibit. We wanted everything to be absolutely up to date and accurate.
Mm. And yeah, and I think that's critical. Although, you know, there are quite a few anti-Shroudists, and I'm sure they'll think of something to come up against it. But nevertheless, the fact that you purposefully went and really tried to make sure that as you know as best agreed upon facts as possible, that's really very good.
There were some things that were hard for me to actually take out, but some were necessary to take out because they are so controversial. I'll give you a good example. In the original exhibit in Jerusalem, there was an entire panel dedicated to the coins on the eyes of the man of the shroud. And I think it's not disputed that there are some circular objects on the eyelids of the man of the shroud. What is disputed is if those can be proven to be coins from the first century,
Mm.
printed by Tiberius. And that is very, very controversial. And some people hold opinions on either side of that coin. And so we felt like we don't need that information. That doesn't, we have so much other information. We don't have to focus on that. We don't have to put anything in there that would be potentially controversial. So we took that completely out of the new exhibit. It doesn't reference anything at all about there being coins over the eyes of the man of the shroud.
Mm. And I've talked to, and that's a really interesting point because I have talked to, a handful of people, and it's probably 50-50. Some of them say, yep, if you look at the 1930s Henri pictures, it looks like there's coins there. And then you get a little bit later with like the Stirp pictures from Barry or even other ones. And then now even with some of the AI and all of the image processing is done, it's not quite certain whether there are actual coins on there. And so interesting anecdote on that. Now, I did notice you put a lot of really good imagery into, each of those panels. And to your point, I think you could just, if you had only 30 minutes to absorb what you have the title and then you have the images. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I had no idea how difficult it was going to be to select the images and then also to get permission to use the images. That was very important to us as we were putting it together. So every image that's on there, we reached out to the owner of the image and asked for permission, completed licensing agreements, unless of course it was in the public domain, then it was, oh, thank goodness, that's easy. But actually selecting the images and trying to find the ones that looked the best in terms of the color scheme that we had selected, and then also went with the wording. That was a very labor-intensive process. I didn't anticipate that, having never worked on a project like this before, but it was also very fun and a great learning experience. I have to give a shout out to the team, the graphics design team that we worked with. We worked with a company called Fusati, and their team, they bought into our mission. They just were fully on board, and they were really great partners with us in developing this. And it would have been a totally different project if we hadn't had their talent involved in the vision of going through this journey with people.
Mm. Well, yeah, it really did come out, and I like the four colors that you have for, being able to follow different tracks. That makes it also it puts things into the right perspective, I think, and so kudos to you for doing that. Now the exhibit you said is four panels, 4 by 6 feet or so. And that's now a traveling exhibit. Tell us a little bit about that.
So we designed it to be in two formats. So one is a permanent format. And so eventually the existing exhibits that are in place in the United States and around the world, they can be updated to the new panels if that's something that they decide to do. And we are also in the process of establishing quite a few new exhibits. Many people have reached out after the National Eucharistic Congress to explore having an exhibit. And so the exhibit we had at the Congress was what we call a traveling exhibit. So it was pull-up banners and everything was portable. We came in, we set everything up in a few hours. And then when it was over, we took everything down and took it away in a few hours. And almost all of the items that were on display are owned by a wonderful woman named Pam McHugh, who lives in Alabama. And she has made it her personal mission to make this exhibit available to people. And she's already very booked for the rest of this year and a lot of next year. She puts it in her car, her vehicle, and drives it around and sets it up because of her personal commitment to sharing this information. But our goal is that by her doing that, she's planting seeds all over the country for people who want to have it in their own area. So, for example, if a church or a diocese or a community wanted to have their own exhibit, it's a pretty small investment for the impact that you can have. And it's very portable, it stores very easily. And so our goal is that we can have these exhibits all over the country, eventually all over the world, where people can come and they can learn at their own pace. They can bring people through it, and everyone has the opportunity to go on this journey and come out with this their own personal answer to this question of who do you say that I am?
Yeah, that's wonderful, and the ability to be able to bring that to the masses, so to speak, is that's really valuable, and to get that message across. So you want to end the kind of the exhibit with a message of hope and the resurrection. Tell us how that transitions, and tell us about what you mean by that.
Well, the final panel is, I'll see if I can share my screen more successfully this time. The very last panel raises this question of who do you say that I am? Okay, I went too fast for it. So we have this moment of Holy Saturday reflected, this time where Jesus was completely obedient in the tomb and even rested on the Sabbath. And then we have this resurrection panel of the scriptures, the Gospel of John, really what more needs to be said, because John saw and he believed. So then our very last panel is this idea of hope, where every person has to say, has to answer the question, who do you say that I am? And so we talk here about image formation because there are quite a few theories about image formation. And we didn't want to support one theory over another. We just wanted to say that scientists believe that there could have been a powerful burst of radiant energy from the body itself that caused this miraculous image to be formed. And so we lead to this question of do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead? And if he did, then what are you going to do about it with your life?
Yeah, it's I love that picture with Thomas where he's sticking his fingers into the side wound, and I'm gonna butcher the verse that's there, but blessed are you that see, but blessed are those that don't see and that haven't seen and yet believe. And I think for me that phrase there is just so powerful, because we will, we have not seen, like Thomas or any of the other apostles have seen and been there and actually witnessed Jesus resurrected, and yet we believe, and that is such a powerful image for me.
I really love that image, and I wanted this version in there where the shroud has been substituted for the image of Jesus' physical body, because to me what this image says is go ahead, probe it, ask your questions, do your scientific studies, check into the history. The shroud can handle it. And I feel like this picture really represents that go ahead, give us whatever you got, because the shroud can stand up to that level of scrutiny.
Absolutely. How true, how true. Is there anything else that we left off that you'd also want to bring up about that?
Well, I think that our mission, our goal as Athonia is to educate people about the shroud, because I feel like it can be so life-changing for people. And I feel a really strong responsibility. I think you feel the same way. And it seems like a lot of us of our generation who've been interested in the shroud for many decades, we're very eager to pass on our knowledge and our love and our passion for Jesus through the shroud with a new generation of people, because we want this knowledge to be carried forward, and we want the life-saving message that Jesus died, but he also rose. And people want that message of hope. They want to hear that, they need to hear it, and we have a responsibility to share it. So that's what we're trying to do with Athonia and through this exhibit. So I really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk about it, and I welcome people to reach out to find out how they can host an exhibit in their community.
Yeah, wonderful. The only thing I didn't like though is I don't like the word decades.
It's decades for me, I have to say.
Me too. I hate it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's such an awesome message, and that's so great that it can be easily shared and brought to communities around the country and hopefully then around the globe. So where can they find out more? Where can they reach you to learn more and potentially inquire about that?
Well, my husband made a wonderful website for me. So it's Shroud Educator. And that's the term I prefer for myself. I don't really feel like I'm a shroud expert. There are a lot of people who are scientists and researchers who are truly shroud experts, but I'm trying to educate people about what the experts have discovered and share that with people. So I call myself a shroud educator. So that's my website, shroudeducator.com. And my email address is on there so people can reach out to me. And I try really hard to get back quickly. And I did think of one other thing I should mention, and that is that everyone with Athonia is a volunteer. We are all 100% volunteers. And we were able to do this work because we had some very generous benefactors, and they paid for the graphic design, and we have people who paid to have the banners printed so that we could have them on display. So we've had very generous people work with us, but we want to make this as affordable as possible for people. And so we don't charge for the exhibit. We ask that people donate something to our apostolate to help keep us
Hmm.
sharing it, moving it forward. But that really is the idea, is to pay it forward. And we just are grateful that people have bought into our mission with their financial contribution, and then also the many, many volunteers that we have that dedicate their time.
Yeah, that is so wonderful. And so shroudeducator.com, shroudeducator.com, and your email and contact information is on there. That's wonderful. Um, Nora, thank you so much. It's great to hear the good news of what you've been able to do, and how now you're going to amplify that message by making this exhibit and these materials available around the country and around the world. That's a wonderful mission, and it sounds like you've got a lot of good success in front of you. So, congratulations on all that you've done.
Well, thank you so much. I feel so blessed to be doing this work at this stage of my life, and I feel very blessed to be working with people like you and sharing this message, and I invite more people to join us because it's wonderful work. It's hard work sometimes, but the blessings are just abundant, and the joy that comes from sharing this, it's unmatched.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. Just getting involved in the shroud, I never knew what was going to happen, and you never know what's going to happen, and it is so fascinating to see what can happen and how you can bring the message of hope to so many people and around the world. So Nora, again, thank you so much. It was shroudeducator.com to reach out to her. And then to the audience, otherwise, please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. And if you'd like to, please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. And of course, if you like this one, rate it 5 stars. If they had a 6 star, I'd like you to rate it with 6, but I'll take the 5. So Nora, thank you so much.
Thank you, Guy. I really appreciate it.